nowadays they have made popular this idea of like, oh, but there's a separation between church and state. You know, the government is separate from religious affairs, okay? Worship of God and managing the affairs of the people, these are two different things. And that was a big deception by the devil, we believe. They sought to separate the two of them when it doesn't even make sense, because the two of them are inherently tied to one another like this. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الإمام المهدينا وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear sister and companion, Tiffany.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear father.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me back.
God bless you. So today we would like to talk about the cornerstone of our beliefs, the central theme of it, the essence of our religion, and that is this idea of the supremacy of God, the kingship of God, the rulership of God, the idea that allegiance is to God alone. And that's what's actually written in the center of our flag, of our banner. The black banners that were mentioned, that they would emerge from the east in the end times, in the times of the Qa'im or the times of the Mahdi. The words al-bay'a lillah, or allegiances to Allah, that is mentioned in the narrations as being the motto that is written inside of the banner of the Mahdi, that whereby we would know that that is the Mahdi.
Yes.
This idea of the supremacy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a complex one, and it causes, I think, some people to become concerned or afraid. It might cause people to raise questions and to ask, what does this mean? Does this mean that this is a political movement? Does this mean that you guys are trying to establish a state? Does this mean that you guys will try to implement the jurisprudence or the Sharia upon other people? Does this mean that you guys don't recognize the authority of the governments that exist on the planet? What does this mean? And this is different. This is not like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I think that it's these questions that I seek today to kind of answer through us having a very honest and open discussion about this very important and vital pillar and aspect to our faith, okay?
Okay.
So basically, we believe that there is a creator, and we believe that God is the creator. And we believe that God, being the creator and likening himself in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, and also in the Islamic narrations and the hadiths on the tongue of the Prophet Mohammed sallallahu alaihi wasallam, God likens himself to a father.
Yes.
Hence the narration where he says that the creation are the children of God, and the most beloved to God are those who are the kindest to the children of God, right? So if God has children in this parable or this example, then God is kind of likening himself, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is likening him to a father. And we believe that it is upon God, the creator and the father of creation, to take care and sustain and raise his children. I think that that's a very basic notion and fact aspect that we, meaning all peoples that believe in a God and recognize that there is a creator to the universe and to creation, we all agree that it is God's responsibility now to sustain creation, and that without him, we would not be able to be sustained, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And taken care of. Mm-hmm. And I think that all creatures, for the most part, they hope that the God that created us all is a kind God, and we would imagine him, and we do believe him to be a just God. And so we are constantly looking forward to, expecting, desiring, wanting to feel and taste the justice of God in creation. Everybody wants a righteous father. Everybody wants a righteous experience on earth. And we believe that in order for God to fulfill his responsibility of taking care of creation, the only way that he can do so is if he is in control of the government. If he's in control of the government, why? Because what is a government? A government is a body of individuals that is set up, that their purpose in life is to take care of the population, take care of the creatures, right?
Yeah.
And so, because every king, every president, every prime minister that is voted into power or appointed somehow to take care of the affairs of the population that he is appointed over, he has to form a government to assist him and to carry out his will, his plan, his vision, right? Mm-hmm. So we believe that likewise, in order for God to take care of his people and his creatures, his population, he has to set up a government. And the government has to be under his control. And not just the government, but also the land, the resources that the human beings, need to survive and to sustain themselves. This also has to be under the control of God. And who else better than God to control it, seeing how he is the one who created it, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so he owns it. And that's why we say, Allahumma malik al-mulk, O God, the king or the owner of all ownership, the king of all kingship. He's the one who created everything. So he is the king of all kings and the owner of everything that there is to be owned, and the owner of all owners that own things or claim to own things in creation.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And we believe that God made this perfectly clear for mankind from the time of Adam, from the very beginning of creation, all the way till now. This idea has been very much present and emphasized upon in the Bible, in the Torah, in the Quran, and in all of the holy books, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And we believe that in the very beginning, God says, verily I am making a caliph in the land. And he appoints Adam, and he causes the angels to prostrate to him. The people that don't prostrate to him are who? It's Iblis and whoever follows Iblis, right? The children of Iblis. The result of it was that Iblis and his children were banished from the Garden of Eden. They were told that they have to leave it. Okay, so here's an interesting idea that is established at the very beginning of the creation of mankind, where there is this place. The place is owned by God. It's this beautiful garden where there's peace and prosperity, supposed to be for all creatures and for all mankind. God says, this garden belongs to me. He's walking in the garden because he owns the garden, right? And he says, I'm going to make somebody responsible over the garden. And so he creates Adam, and he says that he's going to blow from his spirit into Adam. And so his essence, God's essence, will be placed inside of Adam, and his representative, his messenger, his manager over the affairs of the garden. And everybody has to prostrate and obey and accept that authority. Yeah. The one who doesn't accept that authority, he can't be in the garden anymore. He has to leave the garden. All right. So if you're not going to accept the government of God, then you have to leave the country of God or the property of God. This is the idea that we accept and we believe in.
Absolutely.
And we believe that Muslims should have recognized that. And we believe that Christians and Jews should have recognized that. And we believe that that is the essence of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that God establishes a government in his country led by or headed by Adam. And all those who don't accept that, they have to go outside. And if you cause chaos within and break the laws that God sets up, or attempt to attack or violate the government which God set up, then you have to be banished like Cain was when he slew Abel.
Yeah.
We believe that this idea was further emphasized later on in the Bible and in the Quran in the story of Noah. We kind of get an idea to the vastness of how far God's ownership over the land is. Is it just the Garden of Eden? No, it is the entire earth, actually.
Yes.
God is tired of the chaos that is ensuing on the planet at the hands of people and governments that were not appointed by him. And so what does he decide to do? He decides to send a flood to wipe off, all creatures, to eliminate everybody on the earth. God is the one who created it. He reserves the right to destroy it. He doesn't want that the earth operate except in a just and good, righteous way, under the leadership of the people that he appoints. And that's why he's the one who chooses Noah, tells him to build an ark, commands the believers to board the ark alongside with Noah, and then he clears the entire planet in order that he may give the entire earth to Noah and the believers and the descendants. So here we have this idea that God is owning the earth and he's handing over the earth to whoever it is that he wants. And in this case, he's handing over the earth to his representative, his vicegerm, Noah.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, the same thing happens in the story of Abraham later. You have God choosing Abraham out of all peoples. He's rejecting kings that self-appointed themselves, like Nimrod, right? And he says, I don't care about Nimrod's power. I don't care about his kingdom. And Nimrod was a king that ruled like a very large portion of the earth at the time. And he had great power. God rejected that. God chose his own leader to represent him and to be the head of state. And he grants him a promise that he's going to give him a land from the Nile to the Euphrates, a land that's called the Promised Land in the Bible. And he says that this is for you and the believers. This is your kingdom because this whole earth is my earth. I already promised that I wasn't going to, destroy all the non-believers on it again by means of a flood and wiping it out. And so what I'll do is I'll just give you this particular plot of land. All the rest of the world is chaos. Yeah.
It's so amazing. Like when you're talking about these stories in this context, it's so strange that it never occurred to me that actually the idea of we've talked about it many times, that the idea of God appointing a leader, that's present from the time of Adam. But also the concept of the divine just state and this kingdom that is ruled by God is also present from the time of Adam in the form of the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, that idea hadn't really occurred to me. But clearly that was the goal throughout time. And you're pointing out how it was the goal in the time of each of the Ulul Azm prophets when there was a new covenant brought. It was God attempting to establish once again that kingdom and that place where God's rulership reigns supreme. And that's quite an amazing thread that actually ties all the scriptures together.
Absolutely. And we think that it's not just a thread, but it's actually like the rope. It's the binder of the book. It's the point of it, right? And we find that the same thing is happening again. It's like part 4, chapter 4 of the same story being told again. Here, a self-appointed king and leader, a tyrant who's unjust, appoints himself. It seems like everybody that appoints themselves, ends up being unjust and horrible. And everybody that the people choose to be a leader over them ends up being horrible. And so Pharaoh ends up appointing himself, and he says that he's the leader of everybody, and he's the king, and everybody has to obey him. But God doesn't like that. And he doesn't like that the Israelites and other people that are living underneath the authority or the rulership of this tyrant are being oppressed. And so he chooses his own leader, and his own leader is Moses. And he commands Moses to take the Israelites out of Egypt, out of the authority of the tyrant. He tells them that true believers cannot live under the government of the oppressor, that you have to go far away and live under the king that I appoint. And that is the only way that you will prosper and flourish. And he commands them to go forward, and Moses leads them. He leads them through the sea, and he leads them through the desert. He leads them through the labyrinth until they eventually reach the promised land that Joshua, son of Nun, his successor, leads the Israelites to go into. And so that same theme, the theme of God owning land and being the one who has the authority to grant it to the Israelites, there are people that are living on that land. God says, this is my land. Yeah. I have the right to do with that land whatever it is that I want. And so the inhabitants that are currently on the land, they don't recognize me. They need to leave. They need to go. Their claim of being there first is invalid. They have to go. And so he commands the Israelites, right, to go forward and to remove the local population from the land, because they recognize and are led by a person that is appointed by God, while all the inhabitants of the lands of Canaan at the time, Canaan, are led by various kings that were appointed by the people, or appointed, they appointed their own selves. And so God reserves the right to the land, and he gives it to whom he wills, and he takes it away from whom he wills. Exactly. He grants kingship, and he takes away kingship. He grants land, and he takes away land, because he is the one who ultimately owns it all and rules it all.
Yes.
And it makes sense. You know why it makes sense? It makes sense because we are creatures that are limited. We don't reside here forever. We're on this planet for a very small time, right? Yeah. And so for one of us to claim ownership over something which will outlast us is a preposterous idea, right? Because the earth is infinite and we are finite. So how is it that something that's finite can claim ownership over something that's infinite and that will be there after we are long gone? That don't even make sense, right? It doesn't make sense.
It's like you move into a rented property and then you claim that you own it, but actually there's an actual owner who owns the property. We're just the tenants.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. Thank you for that example. That's an amazing, very good example. Here's a property that is owned. It's been around for 1,000 years, and it's strong enough to be around for another 1,000 years. And here's somebody who rents it and they live in it. And the owner was kind enough to allow them to live in it rent free. And they, end up passing away one day. And then they want to, the audacity, the rudeness of these people that before they pass away, they leave in their will, they write a will and they leave in the will that their children should inherit from them this property that doesn't even belong to them, that they were just renting for a small time period, right? The same thing is true here. God owns the earth and all of the land that's on it. We are merely renters. We are merely passerbys. We are people that are here. We're just crossing a bridge. The earth is a bridge that we're crossing through. We're not settling here. And so why it's not appropriate then that we try to cut up territories and states and make up kingdoms and declare that it belongs to us and make it a thing that other people have to live by rules that we place when this is not even, we're foreigners in the land. We're just passing through.
Yeah.
Thank you for that example. Then what we find is later on, Jesus comes, and the Israelites, they have all their rabbis and their Pharisees and their scholars and their priests, And they are really hoping that the Messiah is going to come from one of them, that the Messiah is going to come from one of them, and he's going to actually enforce them, all right, and support them. And what happens is that God chooses somebody else, somebody that they least expect to be chosen. And that is Jesus, the Son of Mary. And even though they reject Jesus, God does not go with their opinion. God doesn't say, okay, guys, well, since you don't want the person that I appointed responsible over you, or you don't want the king that I chose for you, then you don't have to worry about it. I'll just choose somebody else for you, or you guys choose for yourselves. It doesn't work like that. God got very angry with them. He caused the Romans to destroy the temple and to exile all of them. God ended up not sending to the Israelites another prophet or messenger or Messiah for thousands of years, and they remained for over almost 2,000 years banished from their homeland. And so God, he says that this is his land, this is my king, you have to accept it. And the people who are expecting salvation, they have to become citizens of the state and adhere to the government that God had appointed, even if it is a government that is rejected by the rest of the world, even if it is a government that is without a land. Only those whom accepted the governance and the authority, right, the kingship of Jesus Christ attain salvation. If you don't accept that and you reject that, then you will never attain salvation. And that's a very known concept in Christianity, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you just reminded me of something that Jesus said. He said that whoever doesn't gather with me scatters. So it's like whoever does not give their allegiance to him, whoever doesn't pay their allegiance to God, they end up being scattered. They're not part of the kingdom. It's actually that thing that binds, the kingdom together. It's the people who give authority to God.
Exactly. And, I think that nowadays they have made popular this idea of like, but there's a separation between church and state. The government is separate from religious affairs, worship of God and managing the affairs of the people. These are two different things. We have a constitution, that rules our material lives that we have to adhere to and pledge allegiance to. And that's the Constitution, for example, of the United States, or whatever constitution for whatever country. And then we have the Constitution of our souls, of our spiritual lives, which is the Bible or the Quran, etc. And they sought to, and that was a big deception by the devil, we believe. They sought to separate the two of them when it doesn't even make sense, because the two of them are inherently tied to one another like this. And they never separate. And that's the whole reason why Jesus has a second coming, because Christians believe that there was some unfinished business that he left and he must attend to. And that unfinished business is what? It's none other than him coming back and reclaiming worldly authority and being at the head of a divine government on earth, where he rules the entire earth and returns the earth back to, to be under the rulership and the authority and the kingship of God, who owns the earth and who created the earth in the first place. And so the whole point of Jesus coming back is because the devil had continued to hold firm, and control the governments and the kings of the world. And we find that being present in the scene of the temptation of Christ. And we mentioned it many, many times, where the devil, when he's tempting Jesus, he tells him, he says, fall down and prostrate to me and I'll make you king over all these kingdoms. So he already had authority over making kings and removing kings. And he was going to do so for Jesus, so long as Jesus would recognize that, he's his God or his king. Yeah. Which Jesus refused to do. And so the whole point of Jesus coming back is to snatch away that authority, the earth, from that property, that land, that garden, from the devil and to establish God's kingdom on earth. And then we have the religion of Islam. And the religion of Islam comes along, and lo and behold, it is continuing in the same tradition of Adam and Noah and Abraham and Moses and Jesus. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes forward with the Quran. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Quran, he says that God says that, that he had never sent forward a messenger except that they were to be obeyed. All right. The Quran is clearly stating that we have to obey God and His messenger. It's clearly placing Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the head of state or the king of the affairs of the Muslims. This idea of him being wali al-amr, the head or the master of the affairs of the believers, is one which is very solid in the religion of Islam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam writes a will in which he names his successors, and he makes it a very big, clear point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is choosing Imam Ali alayhi salam after him. And he appoints him in front of 70,000 people, at Ghadir Khum. And in the religion of Islam, the history of the Muslims after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam consisted of this very long battle that ensued between the people wanting to appoint their own rulers and their own caliphs versus the followers of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad that wanted to keep in place the rulers that were appointed by God, and those were the 12 Imams and the 12 Mahdis that follow after him. And so there's this narration from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that really clarifies this matter. In one narration, one of the Imams from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they said that there's a verse in the Holy Quran. And the verse in the Holy Quran says that the earth belongs to God. The earth is for God. Okay. He leaves it as an inheritance to whoever He wills from His servants. And the hereafter, meaning the ending, not the hereafter as in post, al-aqibah. It doesn't mean the hereafter as in the afterlife, okay, but the end, the okay, end of the matter will be for the righteous, the God-fearing. Okay. And then the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they said that the meaning of this verse, they interpret it. They say that the meaning of this verse from the Quran is that God owns the earth because He created the earth. Yes. And anything that God owns, He gave to His messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay? Okay. So God owns the earth, and He left it as an inheritance to whomever He willed from His servants, and His servant whom He left it to as an inheritance was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. And so this is very profound, because it means that the same authority that God has over the earth as its creator, He gave that authority to Muhammad. So now the religion of Islam is stating that Muhammad is not just a messenger to the worlds, but he's actually the king over and owner okay, of the earth and everything that's on it. Okay. It's very significant. It's extremely significant. And then the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam said, that the Imam says that, and everything that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received as an inheritance from God and owns, he left to the Imam of the time that succeeds him. Okay. Okay? Okay. And so the idea here that is central to the religion of Islam, and particularly Shia Islam, is that God owns the earth. He left it for Muhammad. Muhammad is now the head of the government that's established by God. He is delegated the affairs of everything that's on the earth. And when he passes away, his successor, Muhammad, passes to him the matter, and the matter is the entire earth. This is his inheritance.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
So Imam Ali alayhi salam became the one who is sitting in the seat of Muhammad, who's sitting in the seat of God. And after him, his son Al-Hassan, all the way down to the current king and authority of the earth, and that is Imam al-Mahdi, Mohammed ibn al-Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. Imam al-Mahdi, who's known as the Imam of the time. He is currently the inheritor of the entire earth and everything that is on it. And another hadith from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam says that whoever does not recognize that we are the kings of the affairs or the managers of the affairs, Wulat al-Amr, we, to us, are delegated the affairs of all mankind, has disbelieved. And so we have to, it's part of our belief and all Shia Muslims' beliefs, and really all Muslim beliefs, that the earth and the affairs of all the creatures that are on it are to be managed by the Imam of the time. Hence, whoever dies and doesn't know the Imam of the time has died the death of ignorance. In another hadith from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, it basically follows upon this same idea, and it states, whoever on earth gives life to dead land gets to keep that land.
Okay.
And in another narration, it clarifies that even further, and it says that whoever gives life to a dead land gets to eat whatever he makes from that dead land, and everything else from it, he has to give it to the Imam of the time.
Okay.
Okay? And so here becomes clear this kind of system that's put into place. And the system that's put into place is what? Is that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi and his successors, they are the kings of the earth, they own it. They own every single square inch because they are the most just. And if they weren't the most just and the most perfect and a perfect reflection of God in creation, if they didn't have within them the spirit and the essence of God himself, they would never be delegated the affairs of the people. The idea that's being shown here is that there's this spirit that is blown into Adam in the very beginning. That spirit represents God on earth. That spirit is placed in whoever God chooses. Whoever God chooses and that spirit is placed into, he becomes the inheritor of God's authority and property in creation.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And when one person passes away who acts as a vessel for that spirit that never dies of God, that spirit passes on into the next one and the next one and the next one. And authority and kingship and ownership is preserved for that spirit and that spirit alone. And it is only that spirit from the time of Adam all the way till our current day and age and beyond that really has the right to delegate the affairs of mankind and ensure that everybody gets whatever it is that they need. And God's system is that the garden is present and it is available for all the workers to work in it. If a worker comes forth and he works on a land, he can work as hard as he wants and to make it as beautiful as he wants. And he can do whatever it is that he wants with that land, but he can only take from the land that which he needs.
Yes. Okay.
After he's done and he's satisfied and he's taken what he needs from the land, he can't continue to hoard the resources from the land and allow 25,000 other children to die every day from starvation. He can't allow 9/10 of the planet to live in poverty or without, while 1% or 10% of the population, rule them or live over them.
Yeah, of course.
Everything other than what you need from the land that you work has to be given back to that spirit or the imam of the time in order that he can ensure that everything is fairly and justly distributed amongst the people.
I mean, this is just such a just system, and it just goes to show the beauty of God. I mean, God is a just father, and he would never go and leave his children without somebody in charge of their affairs. A father doesn't just go off and leave his children without somebody to look after them. So he's given somebody to look after us, and that person is in charge of enforcing justice. And a righteous father would also never allow that one child takes all of the resources to the detriment of the other children. But he does allow that the children, they work hard and that they prosper in the land, and that whatever they don't need, they give back to the one in charge. It just makes sense, and it's such a just and beautiful system.
Exactly. So for us, we're practicing our religion by holding this belief.
Yeah.
We believe that by placing the idea of allegiance is to Allah on the flag, that we are practicing our faith, because we believe that that is the essence of all of the divine religions that have come down.
Yeah.
We believe that there is no difference between any other king on the earth or president and prime minister and with Pharaoh and Nimrod and these guys. Why? Because they were not appointed by God. Some of the kings that are not appointed by God are really bad, evil tyrants. Some of those kings and prime ministers and presidents that were not appointed by God, they are less tyrannical. Some are even righteous, so to speak, or good. But at the end of the day, they are good people, perhaps, that are not appointed by God. And if you're not appointed by God, then you're appointed by the devil for some particular reason. And you're sitting in a place that really you shouldn't be sitting in. It's not for you to do that. And if it was for them to do that, then what is the point of Jesus Christ coming back? I mean, we should just say that we don't need Jesus to come back because we have already the kings and the prime ministers and the presidents that we have. Why do we need Jesus? We don't, right?
Yeah.
Why do we need Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam to come? We don't, because we have already other people that are righteous, or the possibility of us electing or appointing, somebody who is righteous over our own affairs is good enough. But we find that the Quran says that's not possible, because if we follow most of the people that are on the earth, we would be led astray. And we find also that God in the Hebrew Bible becomes very offended and angry at the Israelites in many occasions, and especially evident in the story of Saul and Samuel, when they suggest that somebody else be appointed other than Samuel, and they ask God for a king like the other nations. God becomes very offended. It's present in the New Testament, as we've spoken about before, me and you. And how the people were given the choice by the Romans when they occupied the land. The Romans were like, who do you want? Do you want Jesus? Do you want Barabbas, right? The evil criminal, murderer. And the people said, no, we want Barabbas. We don't want Jesus. So here the people were confronted with a choice between the king that was appointed by God, whose righteousness manifest, or between a murderer that they knew was a murderer. And they chose the murderer. And so how can we trust the opinion of the people? Some of the brightest minds that have ever walked on the earth, such as Socrates, he was opposed to the idea of democracy because of that. He said, we cannot choose the leader. Why? He said, it's very simple. He said, if you take two people that are extremely ignorant, okay, and they hold an opinion that's really bad, and you put them in front of somebody who's a scientist, who's educated, who has the interest of the people in mind, who's known as being honest and righteous. In a democratic system, these two evil criminals, these two evil, uneducated individuals will always have their way because they are more in number, right?
Exactly.
So it's about more.
Yeah.
Whoever has more numbers, they win. Their system wins. And the Quran and the Torah and the Bible, they all tell us that most of the earth is unrighteous, right?
Yes.
Hence, God's chosen people are only a small group of people, and that's the Israelites, and everybody else is bad at the time, right?
Yes.
For the majority of the Hebrew Bible. And, the same thing is present in the Quran, that those who are with Muhammad and accept Muhammad's rule, these are the believers, and the non-believers are many, many more. The angels are few, and the demon on earth, the angels are few, Al-Haft Sharif says, and the demons are many, and the animals and the beasts are many. And so a democratic system will never work to bring about a righteous and just solution so long as there are more unrighteous people on the earth than there are righteous people. It's just not going to work. And we believe that we have an obligation to only pledge allegiance to and follow the person who is appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, does that mean that we want to achieve that through violent means? No, we don't believe in that.
Yes, we don't.
We don't believe that the Quran teaches that. We believe that the Quran teaches the opposite of that, that you can never force your religion on anybody. We believe that all of the prophets and the messengers, they demonstrated that you can't force people to accept religion. And so we would never seek to, and the believers would never seek to violently establish a divine just state, or to topple any government, or lead any coup d'etats, or do anything to destabilize the peace in any of the lands. But we believe that we have an obligation to inform the people, and that we have a duty to inform the people that there is actually living today somebody who was appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody who has the Spirit of God within him, somebody who is actually the king that was dethroned and pushed off of his throne, somebody who has more of a right over the earth and the people that are on it than any of these other kings that are there. And that's our freedom to believe. It's our right to believe. We have a right to believe that, just as much as the Jews have a right to believe that the true king of the world is the Messiah, yes, and that they're the true people of the world, right? Yes. The true, chosen people of God, and that God gave them a right to kick out the Palestinians and to establish a state, just so much as they believe that one day the Messiah is going to come, and that's why they need to build the third temple, so that the Messiah will come and actually rule over all of the nations of the earth, just as the Christians believe that Jesus Christ will come in the end time and rule the earth, whether the people like it or not, and he will establish God's kingdom, and that he is the true king, and that so everybody else's rights have to take a back seat, right, in order that God, who created the earth, that his will is implemented, just like the Muslims believe in the concept of a Mahdi. We believe that the Mahdi is here, and Jesus is here. And it's not just about Mahdi or Jesus. If we were living in any other time during the earth's history, there would always be the Imam of the time, and it's always the Imam of the time, or the person, the prophet, the messenger, the king, the judge who is appointed by God, who has the authority to rule over the earth, and the people. And that's whom we reserve the right to believe in. And so we don't want to pledge allegiance to earthly kings, false kings from the devil. Yeah. Because we believe that if we do pledge allegiance to one of these kings or prime ministers or presidents, then we're actually pledging allegiance to the person who appointed him, right? Yeah. Because there's narrations from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam that state that if you have somebody who tells you to do something and you obey them, then actually you obey the source of where that command is coming from. Yeah. So if somebody commands you to do evil, then that evil was from the devil. And so by obeying this person, you're obeying the devil, right? And if he commands you to do good, then you're doing good because the good came from God. And so by obeying this person's command, you are obeying God. And so that's why there's a hadith that says that there's no obedience to a creature in the disobedience of God, right?
Yeah.
We only obey creatures in the obedience of God because we're actually by that obeying God.
Yeah, and Jesus also, he called the non-working scholars, the self-appointed scholars, the children of the devil. He said, like, you do the will of your father, Satan. So
exactly.
The same.
So we can't do the will of Satan by pledging allegiance to these demons and, recognizing their countries. We just can't do that. And this is like something that's in our heart and souls and minds. If we're being non-violent, if we're not participating in politics, if we are not building a militia, if we don't have any weapons, if we believe in peace and turning the other cheek, then what is it that anybody should bother us about, or be angry and try to force us to to feel any other way? I mean, they grant rights in the first world countries, right? Yeah. To everybody, even the people that believe that God is a flying spaghetti monster. I mean, they have an officially recognized church and religion, and they're free to believe in that. Anybody who wants to believe in anything is free to believe in anything. There's people that believe that they're cats. There's people that believe that they're dogs or that they're different creatures. There's people that identify as that. People are free to identify as, men or women or anything else. And they should be able to, because God granted mankind the freedom to believe whatever it is that they want to believe. Their beliefs in their hearts and in their minds is between them and God. And so that's that. If I want to identify as the Mahdi, if I want to believe that I'm the Mahdi, if people want to believe that about me and they want to share with me in this belief, if people see logic and truth in what it is that I'm saying, and we're posing no problem for others, then we should be able to do so. And that's what we do. And we also, identify these worldly authorities as being appointed. We recognize them as being appointed by the devil, and we want to have nothing to do with that. Because why? Because we really believe that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made it very clear, him and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, that if we do recognize them, then we're from them. And if we are from them, then we're going to end up in hellfire, because the only person who gets into heaven in every day and age are the people that recognize their divinely appointed king. And they partake in and are part of that divinely, divine population, that divine garden, that divine government. These are the only people that attain salvation. Hence, the Jews that are with Moses, they attain salvation. The Jews that are with Joshua, they attain salvation. The Israelites that are with them, the Israelites that are with Jesus, they attain salvation. The Israelites that are with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Muslims that are with Muhammad, the believers that are with Muhammad, they also attain salvation. The Shia companions, right? Whether it's Salman al-Farisi, or Abu Dhar, or Al-Miqdad, or Ammar ibn Yasir, these guys, they attain salvation. The narrations state that the entire Muslim nation apostated after the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why were they considered to be apostates except for those four companions? Because everybody else accepted the authority of Abu Bakr and Umar, and they abandoned the wilaya, the kingship, the authority of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. While Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib was appointed by God, and Abu Bakr was appointed by the devil, and the first person who pledged allegiance to him was the devil. Whereas the first person who will pledge allegiance to the Mahdi is Gabriel. And so we believe that if we don't want to be apostates, because it is possible that all of the Muslims be apostates, even if they're praying and fasting. We actually do believe them to be apostates. We believe very clearly and openly, I'm saying it, that the entire Muslim nation have all apostated. They are apostates, kuffar. And the same thing with the Christians and with the Jews and with the Hindus and with the Buddhists. All of them are non-believers. You can only be a believer if you recognize in our religion, and we believe that that is the religion of Islam and Judaism and Christianity. You can only be a believer if you are recognizing the authority of the divinely appointed imam of the time. And so we can't recognize any other authority, because you can't side with Imam Ali and Abu Bakr at the same time. You can't side with Muhammad and Musaylama at the same time. You can't side with Jesus and, Pontius Pilate at the same time. You can't recognize these authorities together. You can't recognize Moses and Pharaoh, or Abraham and Nimrod, or Noah and the descendants of Cain, right? The governments that were in place at the time. You can't recognize the authority of Adam, and also at the same time the devil. There were angels, they prostrated to Adam. The children of the devil and the demons, the rebels, they prostrated to the devil, and they followed him outside of the garden. And so that we don't want to be outside of the garden. We need to be in the Garden of Eden, and we believe that God is going to establish that garden one way or another. We believe that he's establishing it actually right now. And we think that this notion is very important, and we are calling upon all believers around the world to do whatever it is that they can do, right? To reach God's divinely appointed imam, to be a part of his Garden of Eden, to give back the resources which were lent to them, in order that they may do like the apostles did, and establish a divine community around the Jesus of the time, the Moses of the time, and that is Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam and his successors, the 12 Mahdis.
I mean, I think that the choice is very clear, and every human being in the world has the choice whether to be a part of the Garden of Eden, to be a citizen of the Garden of Eden, that divine just state, to be with the messenger and the king who God appointed, or to be banished from the garden and be in the darkness and be in the kingdom of Iblis, essentially. And I think that it's a very important choice that you've made everybody think about today. And I want to thank you for being that lone voice in the world who has called out this great deception that the religious institutions have sold for such a long time, that you can be a believer in Moses or Jesus or the Prophet Muhammad or Buddha and Krishna, all of these messengers of God, that you can believe in them and simultaneously be a citizen of these tyrannical governments, that you can give your allegiance to anything other than God. And you've said very clearly that that's just not a possibility. You cannot be a true believer in these messengers. What is the benefit of being a believer in these messengers when you reject the messenger of the time? There is no benefit. The true belief is being a citizen of that messenger's state of justice. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that you're the only person on the planet who is calling out this truth.
Yeah, well, I think it's very clear. And I think that it's also very clear, and it's evident in the Holy Scriptures, that the Antichrist is going to preach brotherhood without the Father, right? And that's what we find happening today with Israel. They want God's people, the brotherhood of God's people, without the imam of the time, that father, exactly. That appointed leader. Same thing with the Christians. They want the Father out. Yeah. And they only want the brotherhood, we the people of the United States, we the people, the congregation, right? Yeah. But they don't want the leader of the congregation. The same thing with the Muslims. They want just this relationship between themselves and between God. The Sunnis are ridiculous. They say the same thing that Iblis says, and they're totally unaware of it. They say, why is it that we need somebody in between us and God? We know what the religion is now. We don't need anybody between us and God. And so they repeat without recognizing that they're actually upon the religion of Iblis. He also didn't want anybody between him and God, and so he refused to prostrate to the authority. And so the Muslims, even today, they have this congregation, this brotherhood of believers without the Father. And so the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, all of them, without exception, are following the Antichrist and the system of the Antichrist because they're following the system of the supremacy of man, the system of the Dajjal, the system of Iblis. And while the believers are the only ones that are free from that system of the Antichrist because they reject the choice of man, and they are the only ones that believe in brotherhood with a Father, and that is the congregation with the divinely appointed leader. So thank you so much for joining me, Tiffany, and God bless.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.